The hotshot Corillian pilot's early adventures come to the big screen, but will Lucasfilm's taint of the franchise and behind-the-scenes turmoil spell certain doom for the young smuggler? Find out when Johnnie Torch reviews Solo, a Star Wars story. Well, welcome back once again, one and all. We are here live with another Johnnie Torch Live broadcast, number 85. And today we're taking on an in-depth spoiler review of the latest Lucasfilm release, Solo, a Star Wars story, starring Alden Ehrenreich as the young title character. And let's see here. Okay, this is live broadcast, folks. Okay, so first of all, before we get into any spoilers, this is, of course, a spoiler review, but I will just give you my overall thoughts in a nutshell. As I'm sure you're all aware, there was a lot of controversy surrounding the film, a myriad of controversy. First off, Lord and Miller were set to direct the film. They directed, I don't know, anyway, upwards of 80% of the film. Arguably, it's undisclosed at this point exactly how much they filmed, but the film was set to wrap up shooting within a month's time or so. Lawrence Kasdan and Jonathan Kasdan wrote the screenplay, were not happy with the way the film was being directed, and so in stepped Kathleen Kennedy to relieve Lord and Miller of their directorial duties. In steps Ron Howard, Opie himself, to take on the challenge of the young smuggler's adventures, and pretty much reshot the whole movie practically, and gave us in reasonable time a completed picture. They didn't move the film date to December as it was originally thought they would, because that's been Lucasfilm's release dates for the past 3 Star Wars films. Would more time have been beneficial to the film? I don't think so. I think Ron Howard was the best choice for this, and not knowing what actually Lord and Miller were doing, it's difficult to make a judgment. But considering that people were saying that it was more of a comedic approach, bordering on parody, and to be honest, we've already bordered on parody with The Last Jedi, and I think they were wise to not get too far ahead of themselves with trying to throw as much comedy into this film as possible. Actually, I think, well, let's say Rogue One wasn't exactly a laugh riot, but there really isn't a whole lot of yucks in this one compared to, The Last Jedi or The Force Awakens. I think the film actually is very comparable to Rogue One, and I liked Rogue One. Probably my favorite of the Disney movies up till now. See, this is difficult. I don't know if I'd put this above Rogue One. I think I would put this film above Rogue One in terms of fun. This is a more fun film than Rogue One. Rogue One was basically a lot of characters that were suffering, and whether they knew it or not, were marching to their deaths. So I think basically on fun alone, enjoyment alone, I would say I enjoyed this film more. From a overall film standpoint, maybe Rogue One is a little bit better if you want to talk about in terms of story construction and, the pacing of this film is certainly a bit dodgy at times. And, one gets the sense that it was put together a little bit piecemeal. But overall, yeah, non-spoiler, overall, I had a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. It was definitely much better than The Last Jedi, which, of course, is a low bar to pass, but I would put it way above The Last Jedi. I would put it above The Force Awakens. Again, with Lawrence Kasdan writing it, it did feel fairly authentic to the character of Han Solo. As far as Alden Ehrenreich and his performance, I thought it was very good. You've got to understand, though, the difficulty of trying to emulate a Harrison Ford. I think he did as good, if not better, than Chris Pine trying to emulate William Shatner. That's kind of the boat we find ourselves in. We, can't cross the line of parody to the point where he's just doing an impression rich little style of Harrison Ford. They don't go there, but I did feel that he touched on sort of the Harrison Ford mannerisms a lot more frequently than, let's say, Chris Pine as William Shatner. Now you can put the blame on Shatner and say, well, Shatner is sort of a parody onto himself, and so trying to do a impression of that kind of a broad character and performance is not something that would be recommended. In this case, obviously, Harrison Ford's acting is a lot more subtle, but I did feel that he got in touch with that a little bit more than possibly Chris Pine did. He got the, he got the walk right, the swagger. He got the, I like a lot of his eye acting, looking at Emilia Clarke and so forth. You could see that a lot in the trailers and commercials. A lot of his line deliveries were pretty good. There were times that it was, you know, pretty stark, obvious that he wasn't channeling Harrison Ford, and those scenes were a little more difficult to buy, I suppose. But on the whole, I give Alden Ehrenreich all the credit in the world for doing this. And while we're at it, we might as well talk about Donald Glover's performance as Lando Calrissian. He as well did a really good job. I felt that he was channeling Billy D in a lot of the scenes, particularly early on in the film. There's a great scene later on in the film near the end of his scenes that was also very good that we'll talk about later. But yeah, so overall, I would say again, let's talk briefly about the boycott, which is something else that's in the news. Before we actually get into the film itself, it's kind of important that we talk about all the surrounding issues. Now, of course, Last Jedi was very poorly received, particularly in some circles, and a boycott was called for by a lot of people, not myself, apparently, because I seen the movie and making this video, but a lot of people are just outraged to the point now where they don't want to give Lucasfilm their money. And I can understand the sentiments because I didn't like The Last Jedi either. I particularly didn't like The Force Awakens. That was not a cool thing to say back in the day because everyone was like, Star Wars is back, Star Wars is back. Everybody get excited. And I was saying it's basically kind of a weak retelling of A New Hope with just less compelling characters and contractually obligated death of Han Solo via Harrison Ford's contract stipulations. So they're really not having a very good batting average over there at Lucasfilm. And it's important, I think, also to differentiate Lucasfilm from Disney because Disney is doing a great job with MCU Marvel. How could a company that's doing that poorly with Star Wars do so well with MCU Marvel? And it's because it's basically the head of the studios. Marvel Studios, of course, having Kevin Feige is, leaps and bounds above what Lucasfilm has, being led by Kathleen Kennedy. So again, I would recommend that you go see this film. I don't think that you're doing any spite to Lucasfilm by not seeing Solo. I think what you're really doing is you're just spiting a film that really isn't the enemy here. I think the enemy is really episode 9. If you didn't like episodes 7 and 8 like I didn't, I would say take out your frustrations on episode 9, which is sure to be a disaster from what we've heard in the quote unquote rumors and from generally the lack of respect that they've given the original characters when they've made those films. I would say take your frustrations out on episode 9, which is more where it belongs, rather than Solo, which is, as I expected, it pretty much went off as I expected. It's just a fun space romp. It's not an epic, but not all films are meant to be epics. This is not kind of the story where you expect a 5-star epic to come out of basically the origin stories of Han Solo. So, yeah, again, I'm not very good at giving ratings when it comes to this because, again, like I said, there's sort of the film side of it and there's the emotional side of it. The emotional side of it, I would give it 4 stars. Maybe the overall sort of the overall product, maybe 3 stars. But we'll get into that later. But of course, spoiler warning now, we're going to get deep into the story. If you haven't seen it or if you don't want to hear any of the spoilers, now's the time to tune out. All right. If you're still here, I am just imagining you don't care if you hear the spoilers if you haven't seen it. When I seen the movie, actually wasn't a very busy theater. It wasn't a packed house, but I tried to get tickets for the 6 o'clock show, which was sold out. So, take that for what you will. Maybe the 10 o'clock showing was just a late showing that people didn't want to go to, or maybe the film is not doing so well because of the boycott. I don't know. But yeah, as mentioned before, the film is supposedly struggling at the box office, not doing very well. And will that cause the higher ups at Lucasfilm to finally get their head out of the sand and listen to the fans? Of course, this leads into a whole other, you know, epic rant that I'm not going to get into right now. All right, so we'll start off with the beginning of the movie where we get the crawl, the opening crawl, so to speak. It wasn't a crawl, but it was a static title card where we get the classic "A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far, Far Away." I don't remember if they did that with Rogue One. I think they did. I'm not sure, but I think all Star Wars films are required to start with that "A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far, Far Away," and then it turns into a description of coaxium being the most important. Uh, it's a fuel that's the most important thing in the galaxy to keep your ships running and stuff. You need coaxium and so forth. And we're introduced to Alden Ehrenreich's Han Solo, who is just Han at this point. And he's apparently working for a Faganish centipede or a caterpillar. It reminded me very much of a Alice in Wonderland character with an old lady's voice. And apparently he's doing the Aladdin thing. He's doing the street rat routine, and he's stealing stuff and bringing it to the Lady Proxima. That's her name, Lady Proxima, and she's in turn giving them a home and eats and so forth. And amid this lousy lifestyle, which we didn't get too far back to hear about too much about Han's parents, which is what I would have been interested in hearing, but I'll get to that in a second. But this is where we're introduced to Kira, which, curiously enough, Kira is the name of what Rey's character was supposed to be, I believe, in the George Lucas treatments. He originally called her Kira, and then for some reason they changed it to Rey because they're oh so clever, I guess. But this is strange because her name is spelled with a Q, which is kind of interesting. Amelia Clark plays Kira, and I'm not familiar with her in the least. Of course, she's very famous for playing in the Game of Thrones series. I don't know what character she plays. I've seen one episode. I don't know. I just seen her in it, and so I didn't really have any preconceived ideas about her. And what I liked a lot about the character was, and she's another one of those characters with a lot of gray area. You really don't know where she's coming from. You don't know if she can be trusted, and it's really easy to see how this kind of person would have been in Han Solo's world in the early days of Corillia. And what I liked also was that she had so many different looks in the film. Her look changed throughout the film. I guess, partially because of her status going up and so forth. But I mean, in Lucasfilm Star Wars in the Disney era, she was actually the first leading lady that was allowed to look feminine. Because if you think of Rey, she's basically dressed like a 14-year-old boy. If you think about Jyn Erso, she's wearing combat fatigues and obviously is not in the ability to being glammed up. But in this, they gave her a lot of great looks of, first she was sort of like the girl next door look. Then later on, she was sort of with this sort of retro 1940s type, kind of Blade Runner-esque look, as you can see in this image that I've got here. That's a great look. And it also really added to sort of that authentic George Lucas costuming. because that's kind of what he did with Princess Leia. He gave her, some different looks and throughout the series and stuff, and we got to see, a more feminine looking character that, other than always being in combat fatigues. But I liked this angle. I like the angle that they started with Han Solo and sort of the girl next door that he was in love with, but eventually had to leave behind. And so he turns on Lady Proxima because Lady Proxima is a jerk, a great big fat jerk. Something about these slug-like creatures that give Han Solo a hard time, right? But it was an interesting looking character. I thought it kind of fit in with the Star Wars aesthetic, so to speak. And he does it's sort of a callback to Return of the Jedi with the thermal detonator, and he takes a rock and is like threatening her with a rock, and she's like, "That's a rock, and you just made a noise that sounded like you activated it." Something. And he throws it through a window, and you know that sunlight affects the Lady Proxima, and she shrivels up and goes back on the water. And so they get away in his speeder, and he does like the Empire Strikes Back thing where he's trying to turn the speeder the way the Falcon turns sideways to get through the asteroid field, and it gets stuck and they can't get through. And so they go to like a spaceport on foot, and they get separated because they use the bit of um, coaxium that he stole from that he was supposed to give, I guess, to Lady Proxima, and he bribes the guards to get through the turnstile, so to speak, and he gets through, but um, Kira ends up getting caught by the goons, and basically he has to just go forward and plow on ahead as she gets taken back, I guess, to Lady Proxima's uh, you know hideout. So this was interesting. Now, Han ends up joining the Empire. Now, this was something that I wasn't that crazy about. This is one of those ideas that comes from the EU that I was never that crazy about, where Han was a part of the Empire. He joined the Empire. The Empire recruited him or whatever. And what ends up happening is he doesn't really like what he sees, and it just kind of like, he doesn't fit as an Imperial, obviously. And so he sort of just like jumps ship. I didn't really like that idea, but the concept makes sense here because he's sort of desperate at this point to get away from Corellia. And it's like this is pretty much in the poor side of the galaxy. The only way you're going to get out of a bad planet or out of a bad situation is to join the Empire, and you know. And they say that he's like an Imperial for like 3 years, which seems to me to be a long time. I'm not sure exactly that Han Solo would be able to take orders for that long. Uh, it's not determined really how old he is at this point either, but so he gets into the recruiting office, which was really cool. This was an interesting thing, and this is how he gets his name. Now, remember, this was another thing. There was a lot of controversy surrounding this when it was revealed. You're going to find out how Han Solo gets his name, and a lot of people were worried, like, well, through the whole film, he's going to be known as, Jeff George, and then eventually someone's going to call him Han Solo, and then all of a sudden he's Han Solo. But that's not the case. I really like the way they did it here. When the Imperial recruiting guy is like taking his information, he says his name is Han, so we've got that right. And then he says, "Well, what's your last name? What's the name of your people?" And Han says, "I have no people." And so he marks down on the enlistment sheet, "Oh, Han Solo." And he's like, "Good luck, Han Solo." And that was pretty cool. That's kind of like I think that would be something Lucas would approve of. That's kind of like the Don Vito Corleone uh, Ellis Island uh, scene or whatever it's called in Godfather Part Two when he gets named Corleone. So I thought that was really cool. That was pretty nice. So the thing is that interests me about that. I got to point it out here. We're getting ahead of ourselves a little, but we don't hear too much about his parents, Han Solo, but he does mention his father when he's talking to Lando later on in the film, and he says something like, "My dad used to work in Corillian freighters like this," or something to that effect. Again, I've seen the movie once. I'm not sure. But he mentions his father. And so if he knew his father, how come he doesn't know what his last name is? That's the thing that's kind of strange to me. Doesn't mention his mother at all, which is another interesting thing. Lando mentions both his father and mother. Um, Han says he didn't really have a great relationship with his father, and Lando says he didn't either, but his mother was great or something. So we get to see a little background of these things. That's kind of what I was interested in. I was like, well, how does this, where do they come from really? We don't go that far back, but we get to see how he meets Chewbacca, which is kind of the next thing that happens. Again, if you go to the EU, part of the reason why I think Han is disenfranchised with the Empire is he sees how it treats other species in the galaxy. Even in this film, he says something like, to his commanding officer, we're the invaders, sir. We're the hostile forces here. Why are you, you know, he's basically just mouthing off to him. But he was trying to save Chewie and some Wookiees from slave labor or something in the EU, I think. Uh, in Lucas's original treatments, the idea was that Han was raised by Wookiees on the Wookiee planet Kashyyyk, and Chewie was sort of raised with him as brothers. And I liked that concept a lot. That's not what they did here. They, actually have them meeting each other. But I guess it wasn't horrible. So anyway, we get introduced before we get to that part with Chewbacca. We get introduced to Tobias Beckett, who is sort of the quote unquote mentor of Han Solo in this film. He sort of got the role of, well, the guy, I don't think he was ever given a name, but the guy with the hat in Last Crusade, and he gives Indiana Jones the hat. That's kind of what I thought this was going to be. He was going to sort of be that mentor character. And he's disguised as an Imperial. Han sees right through it because he's wearing like a chest plate that was already burned through twice. So he knew he was in disguise. He kind of wants to join them because he knows that they're, not part of the Empire and they're going to get away. And so he's trying to like make a deal with them, but they're not. Beckett's not really interested in him joining, and he has the Imperials throw him away into a cell as a deserter. And this is where he meets Chewbacca. So this was kind of reminiscent of Return of the Jedi. I remember the scene where he's in Jabba's palace in the dungeon, and Chewie comes out, and you hear him before you see him. In this case, they changed the tone of Chewbacca's growl so that you don't expect it, because they make some comments like, "Oh, we're feeding him to the beast. He hasn't eaten in 3 days or something." So we get to see Chewbacca, and he's all covered in mud. He's not really immediately recognizable either. I think they're trying to play with the expectation of, is that really Chewbacca? But of course, it is. And maybe he was covered in mud, but he seemed a lot thinner than Chewie usually is. But I guess it's the mud, getting his hair, all smooth and luxurious. But so they have this like fight in the um, in the battle there in the what's it called, the dungeon, and they're like chained together, and Chewie's like doing a number on him, and then eventually he ends up speaking Wookiee to him. And that kind of, I got Han Solo in the chat here. He says, talking about my movie, huh? Yes, we're talking about your movie. This is Solo, the spoiler review. And it's pretty interesting the way that Han knows how to speak Wookiee, because I guess being on Corillian, he knows a lot of, different languages and stuff. So that was kind of convenient, but I was all right with it. And he convinces Chewie that he's basically on his side, and they do a, sort of a mock fight at that point where they break the the pillars of the dungeon there and make the dungeon um, open up so they can escape. And this kind of reminded me of Han Solo says, "Hope you liked it." Yes, I liked it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. Um, so they're escaping and they're chained together, Han and Chewie, and this kind of reminded me of the the old Sidney Poitier and Tony Curtis concept, where the two guys are chained together and they're trying to make an escape. And I can't remember the name of the movie, but it's an old movie. If you check out, that the Tony Curtis and Sidney Poitier, filmography, maybe you'll find it. But um, and so like Chewie's trying to drag him in one direction, and Han wants to go in another direction. Anyhow, he convinces Chewie to go after Tobias and see if they can join up with them. And um, there's this little character, what's his name? Rio Durant, who's pretty cool. Now, this guy's voiced by John Favreau. I could tell immediately it was John Favreau. You could tell his voice. And he's a pretty cool character, and he sort of convinces Beckett to let them on the ship and to like join the crew. So they join up, and we sort of flash forward a little bit, and they're going to heist a train, which is sort of an intergalactic version of a train, because the coaxium is in the train, and they're working for let's see, what's this guy's name? Gee, I don't got it here in my notes. Oh yeah, Drayden Voss. So they're trying to get this shipment of coaxium for Voss, and they got an intricate plan. And Val, which is Beckett's girlfriend, is like going to blow the tracks so that it'll stop the train, and they're gonna try to like remove one of the compartments from the train to uh, sort of spirit it away on cables and stuff. Enter the other antagonists of the film, which is I think they're called the Cloud Raiders. They're sort of a bunch of pirates led by Enfys Nest. Enfys Nest. That's not like empty nest to you. It sounds like empty nest to me. But I guess that's the joke. So this is kind of, I think, actually the bonding moment between Han and Chewie, because Chewie's like in danger and he's about to get smashed on the side of the mountain there while they're going by, and Han like puts a lot of effort on trying to save him. Um, because my brother kind of had the criticism that we really didn't see too much of a bonding moment between them. I think that was it. I think that was probably the moment where they kind of became lifelong friends, because they weren't just sort of thrown together by coincidence anymore at that point. They were sort of like together as buddies, I think that was kind of the catalyst for that right there. But so anyway, Val ends up sort of taking one for the team and blows herself up because she can't get away from the Cloud Raiders. Rio gets shot and mortally wounded, and Han has to take the controls, and he ends up getting rid of the coaxium, because he can't manage to get it away from the Cloud Raiders because they're pulling it in a different direction. So rather than sacrifice Chewie and Tobias, he ends up disconnecting the cables. Let me see in the chat. We've got. I kind of didn't like how there wasn't a Chewie thanking Han moment. At least I didn't see it. Yeah, that's kind of true. That's kind of, I think, the point I was making, where there really wasn't like that kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, sort of a bonding moment with them, where you kind of see why they were like, there was like a life debt kind of between them, that's kind of an EU thing. So I don't really think they necessarily had to do that. Um, but anyhow, so they save the coaxium, and now they have to make good with Drayden Voss, because they lost his shipment. Now this is going to be a recurring theme in Han's life, where you mess up the shipment, you got to pay. So that was kind of good foreshadowing. I thought that was kind of cool. This is where he meets Kira again. She's apparently working for Drayden Voss now. We're not really told a lot about her past. She seems to kind of imply that there's a lot of history going on here that we're not really privy to, but she's sort of an indentured servant to Drayden Voss, and she's somehow sort of like maybe one step below being property. And he kind of he calls her his lieutenant, so he kind of treats her more of like an underling more than a slave. But we get the sense that she's not really working of her own accord entirely. So Han volunteers that he can get another shipment of coaxium so long as, Voss doesn't kill them all. So what ends up happening is they're going to do the Kessel Run, which is, really cool, because that's something we've always heard about in the, original film. And going through it all, the Kessel Run is like one of the legendary things that happens. Now, the idea, I think, is that you have to get the unrefined coaxium from Kessel and get it to a refinery before it explodes, because it's uh, highly unstable unless it's refined. So Kira knows somebody that can get them a spaceship to do this, which is Lando. This is where Lando is. Han says, "My theory is that it was all Kira's plan. She's trying to kill Voss from Maul." That's it's pretty cool because you don't really know the inner workings of that. We didn't get to that yet, but of course there's the great cameo moment at the near the end with Darth Maul. Um, so all right, so Lando. Let's talk about Lando. Lando's introduction to the film. He's a gambler, scoundrel. This was a great interpretation of Lando. I think they really nailed Lando to pretty good in this scene, where he's introduced gambling and stuff, and so Han takes the initiative to try to out gamble him. And this was something that I thought was kind of interesting, where Lando is actually cheating. Lando has the card in his sleeve, and that is why. Because one would wonder, why would he put the Millennium Falcon on the table if it is, obviously one of the greatest, spacecrafts, whatever in the galaxy, but he doesn't think he can lose. And in this case, he doesn't lose, which I also thought was pretty good because we got to see Lando pilot the Falcon before Han, because we all know Han's going to have the Falcon from here on. But it was cool to see Lando actually, taking his baby out for the first time in this maiden voyage, so to speak, of the film. All right, so we're introduced now to L337. Now, honestly, this is the thing that I like the least about the film. I found this character really annoying, and she's sort of a robot rights activist, and she's not in it too much, which is which is a positive thing. But let me see. Han says, "Loved Lando." L3, on the other hand, yeah, that's kind of the reaction I think a lot of people are going to have to this character. She's they're having like cage matches with robots, and L3 sort of takes offense at that. And this is where we get the cameo of Clint Howard. Of course, he always gets a cameo from Ron Howard, the director, because it's his brother. He always puts him in all his movies, which is pretty cool. But L3 was the worst thing of the movie. Yep, I'd agree. I would agree very much. Now this is where a lot of the suggestion about Lando and the controversy surrounding whether he was having some kind of relationship with L3, that kind of is handled a little bit better than I thought they were going to. It's kind of played as a joke, kind of where I don't know. L3 has a conversation with Kira where, I don't know. L3 is like saying, "I think Lando's got a crush on me, but I'm not really interested in him." It's kind of strange, which means that it probably didn't need to be in the movie. But that's pretty much the only thing for all the hoopla and all the, you know, panic and stuff that people were having over Lando's character. It was kind of just a poorly conceived throwaway joke. Um, Han Solo says, "I went to the movie thinking something completely different about her. When I saw she was an SJW droid, I was disappointed." Yeah, well, I pretty much expected that she was going to be an SJW droid. But as I said, she doesn't last too long in the film, which makes it, you know, I would have preferred she wasn't in it at all. Don't misunderstand. But I think the joke was that L3 liked him and thought he liked her too. Yeah, that's kind of the way I came down on it. I don't think really Lando was interested in her in that way, but that was kind of the running gag, I think. So Lando pilots the Falcon. Then we get the scene in Lando's quarters where Kira's trying on the capes, and we get a little love scene, which I did feel was kind of in keeping with like The Empire Strikes Back, which, you know, uh, and then Beckett interrupts him, which was sort of like the thing that happens to him with C-3PO. I mean, the poor guy can never get through a love scene. Oh, this is a good point. Han Solo says Nang Num should have been in the movie instead of L3. That would have been probably cool because there could have been some past, uh, relationship between Nine Num and Lando where he might have asked Nine Num to become his co-pilot during Return of the Jedi. That would have been a really cool idea. That would have been a great move. I would agree with that. Um, let's see. Now, this is where Beckett gives Han the advice. He says not to trust anybody, treat everybody as if they're going to betray you. And kind of at this point in the movie, I figured that meant that Beckett was going to betray him. And, I wasn't disappointed. That does happen. He also teaches Chewie to play, I think it's called Dijik. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's the chess game that was in A New Hope, where they play with the little claymation monsters. So that was a cute little callback. All right, so Kira brings Han and Chewie uh, to the planet Kessel, I guess it's called, as slaves. And Beckett wears the Lando outfit from Return of the Jedi, the Palace Guard outfit. I thought that was cool. Out of all the Easter eggs, I really got a kick out of that one, the Lando outfit. And I wonder if it belonged to Lando. That might have been part of his costuming there in his quarters. This is another thing that I thought was kind of a throwback to A New Hope, where Chewie and Han are pretending to be prisoners, like Chewie was in A New Hope. And you kind of understand now why Chewie didn't want to be manacled and play the prisoner again, because it doesn't work out too well here. But eventually they manage to break free, and they come across some Wookiees, and Chewie tries to help the Wookiees. I thought the Wookiee masks was pretty bad, I have to say. That Wookiee mask, I mean, there's like a bunch of Wookiees. We only get a good look at one of them, the lead Wookiee. It looks like a pretty weak mask. I thought they could have worked on something better than that, because when I just watched Revenge of the Sith the other night, and they got like 7 or 8 Wookiees, and then of course they multiplied it to look like 300 Wookiees or something. But those Wookiee costumes look really good. Yeah, Han Solo agrees in the chat. Yeah, that they really could have done. Yeah, it looked like an ape. They could have done a better job with that Wookiee mask. I mean, just use one of the old ones. Use one of Tarful's old masks or something from Revenge of the Sith. That would have been preferable. But anyway, he saves some of the Wookiees while Han's loading the transport, or whatever you want to call those, like mine cars or whatever. And Chewie comes back to help him. And so again, L3 goes nuts and starts liberating the robots, which it does throw back again to A New Hope, where 3PO says we'll be sent to the spice mines of Kessel, because this is apparently something that the droids, would be afraid of, having to be stuck in this terrible planet or whatever, using this mining equipment. Of course, there was a lot of human and alien slaves there that was just as dangerous. The Kessel breakout scene was pretty boring, Han Solo says in the chat, but the Kessel run was my favorite one. Yeah, I don't know, it was all right. I don't know, it was kind of one of the best action scenes, because I liked seeing Han Solo with a blaster doing some shooting, and this is kind of, I think, the only place in the film where he did that. Yeah, so it was okay. So, all right, this is the part I didn't like, though. So L3 gets blasted, and I'm like going, yay! But Lando goes nuts, and he goes out, and jeopardizes himself to get this idiot robot and tries to drag her back to the ship. And, she's falling apart, and he's taking her back like in pieces. And Han goes back to like help him out, because he's shot in the arm and stuff, and he's trying to drag like with one arm the rest of L3. And he just sort of goes nuts, and he's like really crying over this robot. And it's like really the most annoying robot ever. So it's like, I don't think you really lost too much, Lando. But see, the thing is if I imagine that L3 was to Lando what, like, let's say C-3PO was to Luke, and we just have to imagine this kind of history between them, that they were good friends, I guess. And we don't really. I don't think that the audience really feels anything for L3, because she was so annoying, and that we're happy to see her go, that once she's blasted out of the movie, there's not that emotional response that we really lost one of the good guys. It's like, oh great, now we don't have to listen to her anymore. But that was just my impression of it. So now Han and Chewie get to take the controls, because Lando is injured and so forth. So that was cool to finally see them get behind the controls of the Falcon. They put this stuff into the under deck containers from A New Hope, where they hide when the Imperials check out the ship. This kind of bothered me, because I always thought that Han made those compartments, because when he says to Luke, I made a lot of special modifications to the Falcon, I always thought that was one of them, that because as his job as a smuggler required, he needed a storage space below deck, and I thought that was something he created, but it looks like it was already part of the Falcon from the beginning. That, that's kind of a nitpick, but I would have rather have seen him take the initiative to do that, like maybe in a subsequent film. All right, so then there's the Kessel Run. Now, my problem with the Kessel Run was it was supposed to be this like really fast thing where, he made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs, but that suggests that it was fast. But the Kessel Run seemed like it was one of the longest segments of the film because there's a lot of things that happen. They have to put L3's brain into the Falcon as a navigational computer, which made sense because this is another one. There's a lot of tiebacks to the original films. In this case, when 3PO says in Empire, your Falcon has the most peculiar dialect or something like that. I think that was supposed to be sort of the tie-in to that's because L3 is part of the Falcon's memory processing thing or whatever. And so, there's a lot of little tie-ins like that are really cool. But so then they have the chase with the TIE fighters. Again, sort of evokes The Empire Strikes Back, sort of evokes A New Hope when they're, in the gunfight with the TIE fighters. Beckett is in the whatever they call that, the crow's nest or whatever, where he's shooting them off at the gunnery station. Yeah. And this is pretty cool that they ended up, using the same music, really. They had like a mix of the asteroid chase, and they had a few motifs from A New Hope. I don't know if it's the Death Star theme or whatever it is, but dun 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 dun. And that was pretty cool that they, melded in some, subtle, a swirl of interesting musical motifs in this one scene. That was pretty cool. All right, so then when they get through with the TIE fighters, then they get the space monster. I don't really know what it's called in this. That was pretty fun. That was another callback to sort of like Empire, where it's like the space monster with the tentacles and stuff. Actually reminded me more of Phantom Menace with the underwater creatures, and the tentacles are trying to stop them, and then there's like sort of a black hole or something that's pulling them into it. And so they use a little bit of the coaxium to break free. Again, like The Empire Strikes Back, where we hear the system failing. It's that sound of the Falcon not switching on when he's trying to work it. And the little bit of coaxium sort of gives them that oxy boost there, that nitro boost or whatever that gets them into hyperdrive and gets them away. So they land at the refinery. This was probably one of my favorite parts, where Lando has like a really funny scene with Han. I didn't think. Let's see. Han Solo says, "I heard Captain Rex's theme throughout some tracks of the film." That's interesting. I didn't notice that, but that's interesting. One of the things I liked was when they first met. I didn't manage. I forgot to say this, but when they first met, and Lando calls Han Han, I thought that was cute because Billy D. Williams always calls him Han throughout the entire Empire and Jedi, and the first time, Han actually corrects him and says, "Actually, it's Han." So that was pretty funny, and he still continues to call him Han through the rest of the film. But that was a pretty cool tribute to Billy D, because Billy D just called him Han every time in the movies. That was pretty funny. So this was a pretty funny scene where Lando is he's like saying to him, "I want to get paid. I just want to never see you again." And he in the Falcon looks wrecked because just the whole top of it is like all smashed up and like sandpapered down or something. It looks really rough. So and he just goes back to the Falcon. He's like really ticked. And I thought that was funny. This reminds me though, I didn't think there really was a good scene between Lando and Chewie. Because in the Empire, he's like, "How you doing, Chewbacca?" and stuff. We really don't get to see Lando and Chewie interact too good. Yeah, the Lando "I hate you" scene was so funny. Yeah, that was one of my that was my favorite scenes in the film. And yeah, I hate you, and I know. Yeah, that I didn't pick up on that either, but that's great. Han Solo says in the comments that the "I hate you, I know" is a throwback to the Empire. Yeah, The Empire Strikes Back. So yeah, like I said, I wish Han and Chewie I wish Lando and Chewie actually got a little more interaction between each other. But I think the intention was that they were going to be able to do some more of this in sequels. I just hope they get a sequel. I don't know. I mean, I enjoyed it enough that I really hope there is a sequel. I mean, it's not doing too well, but all right. So let's get into the last act here. I'll say so. They're taking this to the coaxium to the refinery. Enfys Nest shows up, and this was pretty funny. Han bluffs. I think you might have seen it all on, they released this clip already before the movie came out, but he bluffs that they have like 30 men on the Falcon and that they better, leave them alone. Otherwise, and then Lando blasts off, leaving them alone high and dry. I really want to see Jabba's plotline. Yes, exactly. That's another reason why we really need to see a sequel to this. But the thing is about this, though, is I don't know if would Lando really leave them alone like that. I mean, he doesn't really have like a real great relationship with Han at this point. But when you think of Empire, when Han was saying, that was a long time ago, I'm sure he's forgotten about that, and Lando acting like you got a lot of guts coming here and stuff. That kind of sounds like something that Han would have done to Lando, leaving him high and dry like that. So I was kind of expecting in the film something like that to happen in reverse, where Han was going to like bail on Lando. But the opposite happens here. So so Beckett steps up and he threatens them, and Nest reveals herself to be like a 16-year-old girl. This was something that I knew that was going to be a girl or a woman because that information was already leaked. But there was rumors going around that it was going to be Han's mother, which I didn't know. I mean, I wasn't really crazy about that idea, but I didn't know if that's what they were going to do with it. And obviously, this girl's like a teenager or something, so I knew that wasn't going to be the case. But and she tells them about how I guess it's Crimson Dawn is the name of this gangster outfit corporation here, whatever, is ruining everybody's lives. And they want the coaxium so that they can keep it out of their hands and stuff. So Han, wants to double cross Voss and, give this coaxium to the, well, I don't know if they're rebels, the Cloud Raiders, I guess what they're called, but I think they're basically the precursors to rebels. So this is pretty cool. I thought this was cool. There was like an intricate plot, and it shows that Han Solo was really savvy. I mean, even back in these early years, he was nobody's fool. So he actually gives Voss the real stuff, but Voss doesn't believe him. And Han's got the blaster hidden on the inside of the lid of the coaxium container, and he knows he's probably gonna have to shoot his way out. But Voss, he knows there's a double cross, and as an audience, we think it might be Kira, but it's actually Beckett. And like I said, I kind of saw that coming, that he was going to double cross him. And the Cloud Raiders or whatever have like empty containers, but they draw out Voss's men and eliminate them and blast them all. And so it was a great plan that actually worked. And Han pretty much planned for this betrayal. And so then Beckett takes over and blasts Voss's men. And he has a really cool line there. He's like, I want to be the only guy in the room with a blaster, or something like that. Oh, also, I wanted, before I forget, Warwick Davis has this cameo around this scene as one of the Raiders or whatever they're called. And yeah, it's cool seeing him again. I think he's been in every Star Wars movie since Jedi. I'm not sure. I forget if he was in. Yeah, I think he was in every one. But yeah, he was like without a mask this time because he was in a mask, I think, the last two. And yeah, so that was cool. Anyhow, so Beckett, he ends up taking the coaxium and he gets Chewie. What is this? Han Solo says, "I didn't see any of it coming." Yeah, this was really good the way this worked out. So he gets Chewie by gunpoint and he gets him to carry the coaxium from. And so Han does battle with Voss, and Voss has like these glowing blades. That's pretty cool because it's not like a lightsaber or anything, but it's like it's got that real sci-fi feel that he's got these like glowing blades. And I actually thought this was going to be the place where they were going to show Han get the scar on his chin, because like Indiana Jones, they showed in Last Crusade that he's using the whip for the first time and he gets a scar or something. And I thought like maybe this is something where the blade's going to come too close and he gets the scar. I don't know. Maybe they just didn't want to get that close to detail with Harrison Ford's scar. But then again, there's always future movies. I guess maybe they don't want to do everything in one movie, but I thought that would be a cool place for it. So anyhow, Kira looks like she's going to kill Han, and she ends up turning on Voss, and she fights Voss and kills him. It's kind of interesting to see what her motivation is here because, uh, obviously she's got her own agenda. I don't think. I mean, I think she would have done this at some point anyway, tried to overthrow Voss, but it's like she took the right moment now at this point to, turn the tide when she's seen the tide was against him. I take a little H2O, so just a momentary pause for a second. Okay. All right. So yeah, around this point, so Han goes back to save Chewie because Beckett still got him at gunpoint, and Kira says that she's like going to steal some swag and come and meet him. Yeah, she was manipulating Han at this point. So she says she's going to steal some swag and then meet Han, later on, to leave together. But she takes the ring off of Voss that is like it's like the imprint that she has on her arm, and she puts it in the computer. And this is the big cameo here of Darth Maul. Now this is pretty cool. I think this was mostly to tie into the Obi-Wan movie, the solo Obi-Wan movie, if I can put it that way. That is in production. But I thought it was pretty cool. So that's kind of, I think, the reasoning for the term Crimson Dawn, because he's got the crimson tattoos, Darth Maul. And I'm so glad that they brought him in, because I got to say, I was personally disappointed in Rebels when he was killed off by Obi-Wan in that other episode. And I was like, that's not really a great way to end. They should have ended it with him in a live action movie against Obi-Wan, but it looks like that's what they're going to do now. So I kind of feel like that character's been redeemed, and he's got the robot legs. You could tell he's uh I don't know if this is the same actor. I don't know if this is oh man, what's the guy's name? Ray Park. I'm not sure if this was him. It didn't look like him. I think it might have been the same voice though. Stefanowitz, I think, is the guy's name that does the voice of Darth Maul. But and then he's got the double-bladed lightsaber, and that was cool. And he says something like, "We're going to work really closely together at this point," something like that. So that was really cool. I really enjoyed that. They brought Maul back, and this is like a great uh, taster. To it was Ray Park. Wow, that was cool. Han Solo says in the comments that was Ray Park actually playing. I don't know why they wouldn't get him back. Yeah, I mean he was great in A Phantom Menace. Oh, the voice was from Rebels. Oh yeah, so that was the other actor that played the voice of Darth Maul. He's good though because he was from Clone Wars / Rebels, and he's done a good job. All right, so anyhow, Han ambushes Beckett and saves Chewie. I don't know how he got ahead of him. I honestly don't, unless he had like a speeder or something. But I'm not going to nitpick. So Beckett starts a conversation, but Han wastes no time in blasting him. Now this is the ultimate joke with Han shoots first, and I'll be honest, I never cared about that controversy. I don't care if he shoots first or not, really. I mean, there's nothing wrong with him shooting first, but I mean, if he didn't, that doesn't really ruin anything for me. But Beckett himself basically congratulates Han on the move and says, something along the lines of, you did the right thing. I would have killed you. So, I don't blame you. But, it's sort of like a meta joke there about Han shooting first. And the one thing about the character of Beckett, and I'll say it right now, is it's like a double-edged sword. That's a pun on Darth Maul. But it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I'm glad that Han wasn't overly emotional about having to dispatch Beckett. But on the other hand, I don't really feel that he was conflicted enough. So it's like, I don't really know. I'm trying to have it both ways. But on the one hand, I kind of felt like he should have felt more betrayed at what the way Beckett turned out. But then again, on the other hand, I'm kind of glad he didn't waste any tears over him, because I mean, Beckett really wasn't, too much of a father figure. He was more sort of just a pretty good work boss, but he wasn't really like an emotional figure for Han to latch onto. So it pretty much worked out all right, I think, at the end of it all. And all right, so Kira moves on in the ship. That was a pretty cool ship, though. That tower thing. It looked like sort of a. It was sort of like a pleasure tower of the gangsters and stuff. I know that's another interesting thing that I really didn't mention, but thinking about it now, they had the singer and the little blue alien guy in the jar singing. That was nuts. I thought that was great. Um, so yeah, all right. So this sort of a melancholy feeling between them two. I think you get the idea they're going to come back. They're going to meet each other again at some point, which is interesting because I was kind of under the impression she was either going to go bad or she was going to get killed because, she's not ever brought up again later on. But it was kind of good the way they did it here, where they didn't have a contrived death. But then again, she still isn't really on Han's side. You know what I mean? So there's no real reason why he would ever go back to her again, even though he kind of, had these aspirations of getting back with her pretty much for the whole movie. But I didn't really feel like they overplayed that. I think they kind of did right by that. It's like she was sort of his like childhood crush, but then again, they really, they really didn't have like this great relationship to fall back on. They were just sort of like kids together, and I think that was kind of like the way to go. All right, so Han and Chewie give the coaxium to Ernest Nest, and she gives him like an ounce or something, an ounce of the stuff, an ounce of precious tritium. That's what I was thinking of from Dr. Octopus. Let me see. Han says here in the chat room, it was weird for me how Han didn't have a reaction for her leaving. They know each other for their whole lives. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. It's kind of like they didn't make him like cloyingly sentimental in this film. Han was sort of just that's what I mean. He was in keeping with the Harrison Ford version of the character. I was afraid they were going to go too far in one direction or the other. They kind of just kept him on the same wavelength as he was in A New Hope, I think. I thought they were going to make him way too naive, and they didn't. I thought they might have made him way too jaded, and they didn't. I think they kind of just kept him on a fine balance through the film. I don't know if they could have maybe made him grow more, have more of an arc. I think it was just fine the way it was, though, so I didn't have a problem with that. All right, so they go back. Here's the ending now. So they go back to Lando. He's having another sabacc match, and Han does the forced hug on Lando, like the way they did in Empire, as another callback, and he steals the card in his sleeve, because he knows Lando is a cheater, basically. I don't really know. I never really took it that Lando was a cheater when I watched Empire. I just took it that he was a little overconfident and he bet the Falcon, but I don't know. So Han wins the Falcon this time, fair and square. Now, this actually took me a while to think about it. Now, I don't know how Han won fair and square if he had the card that Lando had, but I think apparently he didn't use that card in his sabacc deck, in his sabacc set or whatever you want to call it, in his hand, I guess I should say. So basically, he won over Lando fair and square, but that card that Lando had palmed still wasn't in the deck. So it kind of is like a hand that should have been thrown out, I guess. I don't know. But, it's not really something to get worked up over. But I thought it was cool. That's kind of what I wanted to see the most. I wanted to see the story of how Han won the Falcon and Lando did the sabacc match and stuff. That was cool. So Han wins the Falcon. Han and Chewie get into the Falcon and off to the next adventure. And he says something along the lines of they're going to go check out that gangster in Tatooine or something. That's the deal that Beckett was going to take next if he survived. So yeah, that was a good movie. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot better than probably all the more recent Lucasfilm films, the Lucasfilm Disney films. Like I said, it's close. It's a close one with Rogue One, but Han Solo just followed me on Twitter and became a YouTube subscriber. Thank you very much, Han Solo. I appreciate it. And thank you for joining me for this. As you might see, I don't get a lot of viewers. I don't get a lot of commenters here in the chat room. But whenever there is somebody in the chat room, I like to interact with you. So for those of you who don't know, I try to do videos twice a week, Wednesdays and Saturdays. Probably going to do the next one Saturday. That's the next time I do a live video. But anybody that is new to the channel, just check it out. And we talk about all the stuff you want to talk about, the news, the upcoming news for comic book films and TV shows and Star Wars and all the other good stuff. But yeah, final thoughts here. Yeah, I would like to see a sequel. I really think that they got a good foundation to, you know, build up on from here to the next film, the next solo film. Um, no problem, says Han Solo. Thank you. You're really nice. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, the Jabba scene. That's what I would like to see. The Jabba interaction between Jabba and Han. I particularly want to see Han and Boba Fett. Now, there's supposed to be a Boba Fett solo movie coming out. I don't know if that is going to have anything to do with Han Solo. If there's going to be like an Alden Ehrenreich cameo, that might be nice. If they have some kind of interaction, because that's what I kind of wanted to see. But I don't know. I don't know where they're planning to do what they're planning to do from here. I think chances are they're going to have to take stock of what they're doing there at Lucasfilm, because the film didn't get received as well as they would have liked. But, you know, they're not going to throw the towel on Star Wars. I don't think they're going to throw the towel on Han Solo either. But yeah, final rating. I'm going to give this one, as I said earlier in the broadcast, I'm going to say 4 stars out of 5 overall. 4 stars out of 5. A lot better than the other two films in the saga, and a lot better, you know, slightly better than Rogue One, I think. So this is probably my favorite of the Disney films. Han Solo says, I believe Alden will be one of the main characters in the Boba Fett movie, and the whole movie will be around the Jabba stuff. I hope so. I definitely hope so, because that's what I would like to see. And yeah, okay. It looks like I actually crashed here. The broadcast crashed for a moment there, so I can't see the chat room anymore. But again, thank you to Han Solo for joining us for the broadcast. I don't know how much of what I said before the crash got through, but I will repeat my rating. I'm giving it 4 stars out of 5. 4 stars out of 5, because I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. Again, it's not an epic movie. I mean, it's not a 5-star movie. I mean, it's not going to be up there with Empire and Jedi and stuff. But, you know, I enjoyed Alden Ehrenreich. I enjoyed the characterizations of Han and Chewie and Lando. I thought that they pretty much nailed these things, these characters. And, you know, I would like to see what they could do going forward in the future. I would like to see, you know, as I said, the Jabba years, Boba Fett's introduction to Han Solo. This is all cool stuff they could do. You know, we could also see, because they were hinting at a Lando solo movie, but you know, perhaps they could just rework it so that Lando is, you know, we could just see him becoming the administrator of Cloud City and so on and so forth in a sequel. So yeah, this probably is a good foundation for them to build off on. Should they be able to do it? And like I said, you know, Lucasfilm's having some trouble right now. I'm hoping they get their act together. I'm hoping that the fans will have something to really be proud of. Again, they kept sort of the SJW stuff to a minimum here. We got some of that stuff with L3, which, you know, it didn't overstay its welcome, really, but, you know, that's the kind of stuff they have to walk back a little bit more in the future. And yeah, it was pretty enjoyable by my reckoning. So, thank you for joining me, one and all, for this Han solo film review, spoiler review. Let me know what you think in the comments below if you have any other thoughts or anything I didn't mention about the movie. And we will be with you again, as I said, probably on Saturday, as we try to bring you a show twice a week. Thank you once again, and remember, this is Johnnie Torch telling you once again, keep that flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.